artists, and animators. Criminal Insecticide is a short film by Callan McGill, a 3D motion designer and 2D animator by trade who drew inspiration from film noir in this animated short. The film was made as part of the Bugs 7-day short film anthology, where 89 artists were asked to make a film in just 7 days based on a prompt. The prompt was Bugs! We invited Callan onto our live stream to discuss her film and walk us through the project. Hello, Callan. Welcome to the stream.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We're very excited. So the first thing I want to ask you is, as a 3D artist, primarily by trade, what made you interested in using 2D animation for your personal projects?
Yeah. So with my more like 3D oriented work, I've always loved the storytelling side, working on storyboarding and art direction, and trying to figure out the narrative and how it flows. So I ended up taking a animated short filmmaking class over a year ago, mostly because I wanted to learn about the production of that and if I could apply it to what I was doing then. But I ended up coming away with it with this love of 2D animation, because we had to animate like a 10-ish second long shot at the end. So it was learning how to develop a production pipeline and working on the art direction. And by the time I got to the end and got to try my hand at 2D animation and making the shot real, it was like magic to me. It's like I had always loved it, 2D animation, and thought it was just the coolest thing, and loved drawing, but was kind of intimidated by actually trying 2D animation. You just have to be good at so many things to be a good animator. But I got to try it, and it was like, wow, what was I waiting for? This is amazing. It's like the closest thing to magic, being able to just draw and have something come to life. So I've been hooked ever since.
I always enjoy seeing work from artists who move from like one discipline to another, because you always wind up bringing something from the thing you started with to the thing that you move towards. How does your 3D animation experience influence the work that you do in 2D animation?
Yeah, I think it was really helpful going in with at least a bit of an understanding of the animation principles, even if they're applied so differently between characters and like objects or graphics. But it really helped learning just to know those. Also, and having an understanding of manipulating shapes in 3D space, even if with a 3D art I wasn't necessarily drawing them, it helps me kind of internalize some of the ways shapes look like when they move. And now one of the things I really like about or doing in 2D animation is rotating 3D shapes, like the character construction and stuff like that. It's cool to like do the manual version of what you've been doing before in 3D. So.
For sure. Can you tell us a little bit about the 7-day short film anthology and what made you want to participate?
Yeah, so it's a 7-day anthology hosted by STEMs, and all the films had to be somehow related to bugs. There ended up being 38 films over an hour total runtime. And I first saw it on Instagram, and I had seen that STEMs made another anthology in a previous year that was star related, and there were some really incredible films through there. And because I had taken that short filmmaking class previously, and that culminated in having a lot of prep work and planning and making one shot. So seeing this pop up was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity to try and take what I learned there and make a real finished film, and put aside some of that perfectionism of it has to be ambitious and amazing, and just think of what I can make in that short time. And I had two dear friends join me on the project. Haley Stout did this amazing title design, and we worked on the writing together, and James Krasner did all the sound design and music. So.
I just want to take a second to notice a pun. Paramount Pincers Corporation. That is
Yes, that
excellent.
that was Haley's idea, and I love it. It's such a nice detail.
So the prompt for this year's 7-day short film anthology was bugs. I have to say it like that because it was in all caps. A lot of people have like strong feelings about bugs. Are you pro bugs? Do you have a strong like visceral anti-reaction to bugs? How do you feel about bugs?
Hmm. I think bugs are really cool. I like creatures. It's a little different sometimes in real life because you see a spider and or like a centipede, and I don't want to touch it. But I think they're really cool conceptually, even if I don't want one crawling on me. So
Yeah, I feel like the division for me is that if I see it out in the world, it's great. If it's on me,
mm.
no.
Oh yeah, finding cool bugs in nature, like being on a walk and seeing like something cool bug on the pavement is like the coolest thing. But when it's in your home, that's a little different because it might be stalking you in your sleep or something.
Well, now that we got that out of the way, what can you tell us about Criminal Insecticide and what inspired your work on the film?
Yeah, so Criminal Insecticide is our bug film for the project. It's film noir themed, and it came from this core idea, or well, this core fact of praying mantises eating their mates. So we wanted to build up a film noir piece around that idea, but we also wanted to make sure that even if you didn't know that, it would still be fun. So we tried to think about the story as if like would it be fun if you don't know that fact. So ultimately, it's about this detective taking on a grisly new case and kind of lamenting this evil that he sees, feeling hopeless about it. But maybe he can do something for this widow. Maybe he can see a little bit of hope in like the hopelessness of that. But in a twist of irony, the very person he hopes to help is representative of that evil herself. So yeah, that's the core idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I think film noir is an interesting genre because you're playing with like light and shadow. They are some of like the most like dramatic examples of like early film and bringing sort of more experimental um, styles into American film. So if you're looking at like film noir, what are your sort of touchstones that you look at?
Yeah, I think the framing and composition and lighting is such a big part of that. And I think I read it has some roots in like German expressionism with the really
Yes.
illustrative, um, just yeah, painting like compositions, and bringing atmosphere and suspense and tension. I really like more both like some of the classic stuff, Maltese Falcon, Alfred Hitchcock. But one thing I found myself actually touching a lot on with this one was I'm a huge Coen Brothers fan, and I love The Man Who Wasn't There. It's this like modern interpretation of a classic noir type film, and it just has these um, beautifully composed shots and atmosphere and a really interesting story. So I was watching a lot of that at the time. I think our final piece ended up being a little less like sharp and crisp, like you see in some of those, and a little bit more like hazy and dreamlike. And that was partially to fit um, this format of like we were weaving back and forth scenes of the detective and the mantis who's on the move. So it going for more of like a artsy montage like feeling.
How would you describe the pre-production process?
Yeah. Oh, I should be. I have things to share as well. So, uh, yeah. So one really nice part about this 7-day anthology is we were able to do some pre-production before starting the time, and we were also able to break up the time a bit like the due date wasn't like a week out. It was you know, a month or two out. So we were able to kind of like break up based on break it up into chunks a little bit. But we once we knew what we were doing and like what the story was, of course, like first was characters, and I had a lot of fun designing the detective and the mantis. Some of the things you see with the detective, like the detective has 4 arms, so he has 6 limbs total, and the mantis had 4 legs, and that was a detail that ended up not being able to make it into the final product because it was so much more animation. But yeah, a lot of the pre-production was building these characters, getting a sense of how do we turn like a grizzled, hardened detective into a bug, and they're stylized. Like we definitely wanted to push the proportions a lot to give this contrast between even before you know that the mantis is a predator, we wanted her to feel intense. She's a femme fatale, and the detective being more like smaller and squarer, shorter. Yeah, so this is one of my favorite things I end up drawing. We oh gosh, how could I forget this actress's name suddenly? But we really wanted to I'm blanking hard right here. But yeah, we really wanted to embody some of those classic film noir characters as much as we could, and Mantis has happened to look so human already and already kind of scary, so that worked really well with the Mantis. And as far as writing and storyboarding, because atmosphere and mood are so important in film noir, we went straight into like a black and white pass, a contrast like pass of the storyboard, and that ended up being our storyboard. So because it was a lot harder for us to judge how the scenes would work mood wise if we didn't have like some of the color, or not color, contrast.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because you have like a color board, but no color, but you need it because the contrast is so evocative.
Yeah, like these shots, what really determines if they work or not is the contrast and where the light and where the shadows are. So that was, we jumped into that first with the storyboards, and those ended up being pretty much our final storyboards, which also helped us save a little time. But yeah, nailing down who the characters were, that was a really fun part. Nailing down the mood, and then doing all that planning around, these are all the shots we have. This is all that we need to make for them, and then jumping right into production from there. So, yes.
That smoke effect is awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this is one of the places where compositing helped a ton. We really brought that to life.
I wanted to ask too, like, what type of insect did you use for the detective?
Yeah, so he was a beetle. We initially were exploring a lot of different types. We really wanted to make him a rhinoceros beetle, which you can see in this art. We felt it fit the character a lot, but I ended up doing all these drawings of him and realizing he looks like a rhinoceros, not a bug. And I tried a lot of different things. So we ended up just making him a little bit more of a generic beetle, but I think it kind of works. It makes him like more of a everyman type character. But it was really important that he was recognizable as a bug, especially because you don't clearly see the mantis until the very end of the film. So realizing that these are bugs sooner rather than later was, I mean, it's a bug anthology, but there were so many different ways that people used bugs in it that we wanted to make it really clear.
I feel like mandibles are a good way of expressing immediately, like insect.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That that helped a lot. It was also really it was a fun challenge determining how to make make a bug put a cigarette into mandibles. So there's a little bit of like funny moment that comes out of that as well.
All right, awesome, awesome. We talked a little bit about like how film noir was a visual touchstone for this project, but also in terms of animation and design, what are your sort of touchstones or influences, or just more broadly, what inspires you?
Yeah, I grew up really loving a lot of like classic animation, as well as like the Disney stuff that was coming out around the time that I was a kid. I adore things like The Iron Giant and Atlantis. But I also try and get a lot of inspiration from other places. I like way too many things. I have this massive bookshelf over here with comic books and art books and stuff like that. So one thing that I actually was thinking about a little bit with this project that didn't end up coming through too much in the art style because we went with more of like a hazy, smoky rather than like really crisp shadows. But I really adore Mike Mignola and Hellboy. I have an amazing Screw-On Head poster too. But that's yeah, comics. The way illustrators work with line and composition, I just find really amazing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially like the graphic style of Hellboy, I think is very distinctive. And I do think a little bit of interest does bleed through into your project too. Like you do see in like your approach to character designs a little bit of that, I think. Um, so how did you plan on budgeting your time throughout the production? Because you had 7 days to work on this, divided over the course of 2 months. What was your approach to tackling these scenes?
Yeah, I think um, there were really like two big things that helped the most. First was just getting really into planning and spreadsheets and documenting like every little thing that we need and every I even every shot I had a risk factor and it was like from green to red and I wrote out what risk of like things that might be really hard to animate or might not we might have to cut out of the shot um, things like that. So there was the very meticulous overthinking planning and there was also just keeping in mind from the very beginning um, our time and how we had to be economical. That allowed us to think economically with all of our art direction decisions. So many decisions in the film of how the backgrounds were drawn and even, picking a noir style in the first place, getting to not even worry about color. So many of our decisions were based around what we thought we could do and how we can use the time the fact that we don't have a lot of time to our advantage. So things like, the backgrounds are all black and white, and they use like a looser style, and most of the background fades out into shadows, and there's only really detail in these focal parts. There's a ton of things animation-wise, which I can, when I talk about the animation, I have a whole bunch of things I can mention, but we tried to save time a lot there. Like it's very a lot of time-saving decisions, like frame exposure. I think the lowest I went was 4s, and the highest I went was 8s, which you can see in some of the shots. Some of them are a little smooth, and some of them are pretty rough. But in general, I think yeah, not biting off more than we can chew, keeping that in mind the whole time and trying to use it as an opportunity. And then some of the shots that might have had like a more complex background, we ended up going simpler with the animation. Some of the shots that had that we knew would be a really complex animation, like the final reveal shot, we ended up doing really simple backgrounds. Like the last shot is just pretty much a gradient, but it works because the characters are a lot more complex and there's so much more going on. You don't need to be looking at the background really. So.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you two questions. Number one, I just wanted to comment that like I think it's really there are a lot of people who like will comment when like animation is really smooth, but I think that there is an art to having a very spare, very economical animation. Like when you don't have a lot of frames, but you get a lot out of them. You see it a lot in like anime, especially like anime from the 90s, where you know you'll have these like still shots that are just very atmospheric.
Yeah, yeah. That's something that it's a lesson I really learned, like with the first animation class, or the short film concept I made for that one, trying to do everything on ones and twos, and like complicated like hand movements. And going into this, I realized like I can't do. I have to. If I set my my standard for that too high, then the rest, then we're not going to be able to finish it, and things will really suffer. But there's so many amazing animations that are really economical with how they use time. So I think you can make some really great, compelling work with a simpler or lower fidelity style.
Callan, how large was your team and how did you assemble your team?
Yeah, so it was myself and my two friends. I went to school with them. They're really close friends of mine, and I've worked with them on projects before, so I love working with them. So I knew that they'd be good people to reach out to. So it was Haley Stout and James Krasner, and yeah. So I'd end up doing. I did all the like animation, all the production of like animation and backgrounds. But they were there the whole time to like bounce things off of and get feedback. It's really great to not like have to work in a vacuum, especially with good friends. And Haley made the amazing title credits, which you saw in the end credits. And also we worked together on the writing and planning out like what the story is and what's going to happen. And then James really helped tie things together and bring everything to life with the sound and music. I'm very auditorially challenged. So having James on board to really like elevate the film in that way was huge.
Yeah, it's always amazing when there's like great sound design behind animated production because it just makes everything so much more impact. How would you describe the animation techniques used for Criminal Insecticide?
Yeah, here I can now I can open my Toon Boom file if I can find where my cursor is. All right. So I used it's all for the most part it's frame by frame hand drawn. There's a few cases where I did a little bit of keyframe stuff like the cars moving or the door camera movements. But for the most part, because of our time, I had to work pretty rough. So I went straight from a very rough, sometimes extremely ugly, this is hard to look at past to a not perfectly clean version of the rough. Like occasionally lines weren't completely closed, and I had to rely a lot on like close gap tool and harmony and the really nice like auto coloring. Yeah, so it varied a lot per shot. Like this one I have here is most complicated shot by far. It has the most layers and the most going on. That's why this was our like finale shot, and that's part of why it had such a simple background. But I can show a little bit of some of the layers of this. Let me hide some of that. Yeah, so there's the detective's hand coming in the mantis. One thing I did in a few shots is anything that's silhouette or in shadow, don't worry about any of the inner details. Just draw the outline. Just, you know, simple as I can, make it work, especially like something like this where it's just the very start of the shot. So there's a lot of like copy and pasted pieces of frames that are dragged around, things like that. And then I can pull up my clean. Same thing here. It's well, this is the probably the most complicated of the shots, so it's a little bit different than some of the others. But yeah, this first part being completely in silhouette, and I can share the color. A lot of heavy lifting was done in compositing to get everything looking really nice, and that atmosphere is so important to making it feel like film noir and getting it to read right and feel fun and suspenseful. Which, actually, let me pull up this again. This is a good breakdown of like a slightly more economical shot. Seeing how it goes from like a very ugly rough, not many frames, some frames aren't even fully drawn in, and then I think seeing it go from even from like clean and line art to the final comp, that's where like a lot of the magic really happened. Adding a film grain effect on top of it and having it be animated, that really kind of tied everything together and helped hide any little like imperfections, making things more silhouetted, adding like tiny rim lights, all those like finishing touches, I think really helped elevate it, and kind of helped make it. I was when I was working on it at the very end and didn't have all the shots compositing, it was like, is this gonna look good? Is it you know, some of the shots that were more simple, yeah, the magic was done there for some of them. So.
You know, you do describe this as being a very simple shot, but it does occur to me that having a character turn into that's not necessarily the simplest thing, because you do have this character who's moving, the character's made up of volumes. They also have a jacket too that you need to sort of figure out. So what was your approach to that?
Yeah, and I think I would approach it maybe a little bit differently if I had a ton of time to hear. But I think in this case, it was a lot of pulling back on that knowledge of shifting forms and understanding how cloth moves. Something I completely forgot to mention that was an amazing help was for a lot of the shots, I put on a trench coat and filmed myself doing it. And even if like I look, you know, I'm such a different person than a bug, it just understanding like the angles and how the collar looks from like all the way to the side to all the way to the front. I didn't have a fedora, so I used like a cowboy hat for the reference, and just did my best. But yeah, reference helped a ton, especially the shot partway through where the detective looks at his watch. The body there's like so many body mechanics that you don't think of immediately, and I know like a really seasoned, trained animator can like internalize those things a lot more. But with the time, so I didn't have to spend so much time iterating, understanding the body mechanics right off the bat and not having to waste a lot of time with so many different roughs was really helpful. And yeah, and nothing was rotoscoped or anything like that, but just being able to like flip through the frames and see like how something looks like from this angle and understand if I push a glass forward, like I'm leaning back like this, like understanding things like that was super helpful.
It's not just the arm moving, it's your whole body's moving with it.
Yeah, totally. It's like these invisible things that until you're in the situation where you have to animate it and dissect it, you don't always like pay attention to it.
Is there anything else from the production process that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I can go back to this shot more because there was a little bit more here. I thought this would be I wanted to share this one because this was the most complicated and had the most layers, and I learned a lot through this. This was my first time trying to animate like light illuminating a character and moving. So that was a challenge, and I can show a little bit about how I did that.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, going from a silhouette to illuminated character is such a cool effect.
Oh, thank you. This shot didn't come together until the very end. I was so worried about this shot because like so much of this film hinged around this reveal feeling good and powerful, and her feeling creepy and like a monster looming, you know. This shot really had to work for that part of the film to make sense. So I ended up putting off some of it until I got like it doesn't show up in the storyboard because I still like, how am I going to do this shot? I'll come up with it. It came together more towards the end, and I ended up kind of putting maybe like putting more resources into this versus like some of the other shots I was thinking about because I really wanted it to sell. So because of that, it has the most layers and effects, and it's all hinged around that reveal moment of when the lighter turns on and illuminates her face. And here, let me hide. It's like it's really, really quick in the final, and I think maybe hard to catch because there's also a caption, but the moment that the lighter flicks on and you see her face, we wanted her to look like really scary and big eyes.
Eyes are totally wide.
Yeah, like you don't even see the eyelid. And then she kind of like reacts to the light, and seeing the detective, like he jumps back, seeing her and being surprised at how intense the eyes of a predator, as he says in his monologue. And then she kind of softens and puts this mask of innocent widow, which is what he thought she was, back on, but the damage is done and you know what she is.
Yeah, I think that's also really interesting too, and this just sparked for me. You don't see a lot of cigarettes in movies and TV very much nowadays, because there was a campaign, I think, in the 90s to reduce that. So it does definitely give it a very like period piece sort of feel to it. Like it does feel like it is from the 1930s, just because it is so different.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, you can't have film noir without cigarettes. It just, there's something about it. It really, yeah, helps cement it in that time.
I also saw too that you had a shot in a scene in harmony of the sort of cigarette smoke trailing up, and I think it's a cool example of smoke effects too, because you did something that I don't see a lot of artists do, and I think it's actually maybe a worthwhile tip.
Yeah, for sure. I can pull that up.
Yeah. So, what I noticed is you drew the bounding box that the smoke sticks in, as the sort of S curves and C curves you draw those in. Where did you get that technique?
Yeah, actually, right in the middle of when I was working on production for this, I was actually working on the shot at the time, and I had an earlier version of the smoke that I ended up scrapping in favor of this new one, but I attended a workshop. It was like a 4-hour-long online workshop by Spencer Wan. I believe it was through Brainstorm Academy. And it was effects animation. So he went over his techniques for fire, water, lightning, and smoke. And the way he described how he animated smoke just made so much sense. And the techniques that he used, it really, I was struggling with this shot, and it wasn't quite clicking yet. Like, it looked okay, but it didn't have that cool, wispy, pillowy, sort of compress on itself and curl effect. So I used some of what I learned with that, which is like making the boundary and moving the S curves and C curves up along it, but also the easing of like the shapes kind of folding in and catching up to themselves towards the top. Yeah, it was great timing. I was really glad I got to go to that and use what I learned in this.
Yeah, Spencer Wan and Studio Grackle are super cool too, so that's awesome. But I had not seen this technique before, and it's fantastic. I wanted to ask you, Callan, as someone with a creative career, do you have advice for staying motivated to work on projects in your spare time?
Yeah, totally. That's something that I still myself am fighting, and yeah, I think it's hard for any creative. I learned a lot with this in regards to that, because there's traps I've fallen into in that regard, and part of working on this project was really great for learning some ways to try and overcome that, like falling into the trap of overthinking. I could do anything, so what am I gonna do? I'm gonna spend so much time thinking about what I want to make that I don't even make it. I've done that a lot. So I think, yeah, settling on something quickly and not being afraid to just decide and do it quickly, get it done. But I think a good way to reinforce that is like chasing things that excite you. Like I keep like a little notebook of, and anytime I have an idea for a cool project, I'll put it in here. And I've had it for a few years, so some of the projects in there I've totally outgrown, and I look back on them. It's like, why did I ever want to make that? But sometimes sometimes I'll look through it and I'll get inspired for something that, and remember, I was so excited about that. Like I can get excited about doing that. Yeah, I think channeling the things you really love and are excited about, because that it can be hard, especially if you're doing a lot at the other time. So I think tapping into some of the reasons why you're doing that in the first place. I think one thing that I really like doing as well is like picking a project purely around something you want to learn. Like I really want to learn how to animate like horses, so I'm gonna animate a shot of a horse and like turn that into a fun project. Then you have a goal that's other than just I want this to exist, and you can help and like achieving learning the thing you set out to learn is an achievement in and of itself, even if you don't finish the thing. But even if you do, it's you're a little more focused on what it is, I guess.
Yeah, the classic advice to people who want to improve their skills in animation or any form of art is practice. But I think you hit the nail on the head in that the trick is not just doing the same thing over and over again, but finding things that you want to learn or improve on. Aside from the compressed timeline, what was the most interesting or challenging part of making Criminal Insecticide?
Yeah, there's a lot that was very challenging about it. One of the facts of making something that's film noir inspired is that it lives and dies by how well the atmosphere works. But the atmosphere depends so much on your background paintings and your art direction, and that's not something I'm very experienced in. So some of my decisions around the backgrounds are based on like what can I do and how can I simplify this for myself and still get that to read right. So those were really tough for me. I had some backgrounds that I was working on them and I just hated them. I hated them, and I would show Haley and James, be like, I hate this one. And then they ended up either being okay or it was a shot that had more complicated animation anyway, so it didn't really matter. But I yeah, that was a way that really pushed what I knew. I mean, of course, in animation too. I mean, when you're doing a project that's a film, all the shots are what fits, not necessarily like what you want to animate, but what fits the narrative and the story. Like I never planned on, if I was just making an animation for fun, I wouldn't say I want to animate someone from above walking upstairs. But sometimes when you are working on a project that's a story, you'll have to do something like that because that fits the narrative, and that was tough. But it's a really good, I think that's why projects are so nice for learning and personal work, because you get to do things you wouldn't do otherwise. But it can be hard. I animated 3 different walk cycles, one from like low angle behind, one from above, and one from like straight front on. And if I just set out to animate something for fun, I don't know if I would have picked those, but they ended up being fun and I learned a lot. So I think, yeah.
I think this is like an example too of like how your experience with 3D animation influenced your work in this project, because I think there are a lot of 2D animators who just have it like drilled into them. Don't create scenes where characters, you have to show the top of their heads or whatever. Like because then someone else has to design that. It creates a whole a lot of strain on the process. So you'll see like in a lot of projects, like things are sort of done in sort of like medium shots and like 3/4 view, because going for all different sort of cinematic camera angles can make the production a lot more challenging in a lot of ways. So I just think it's really interesting that having that experience in 3D animation, where you can move the camera around, can be a little bit more freeing. And when you bring that into 2D animation, you can get interesting results.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess I didn't really think about how that the 3D helped with that in that way, I guess. But I can really see that now. I guess that's part of the challenge of like doing a short film that's inspired by a real, or like a traditionally filmed medium is there's a lot of shots that that work really well if you're filming an actual person doing them, but are so much harder to animate. And yeah, designing a character from above to look okay, it's really difficult. So.
Do you have any advice for artists who are interested in making their own short films?
Yeah, I learned a lot from this one in that regard. This being like my first full short film, and being able to try out some different techniques that were different from that short film like planning project I did. It was a really good lesson in putting aside perfectionism, and because if you want to just get something done and finished, and you can spend so much time on like that last 10%, or even from the beginning, just planning more, being okay and like accepting decisions that might like challenge your perfectionism, but end up making a really great film anyways. So putting that aside, which it was really hard. It was hard with this, and it's hard with any project I do. But I think seeing it as a little bit of an opportunity rather than a hindrance, like what we did with this film, getting excited about the ways that you can save time and cut down on things. Because I think for like especially for a first short film, there's like this pressure and excitement, and it feels like this big scary thing, but committing to something a little easier, or something that you know you can finish, I think is really huge. Yeah, so being getting excited, being able to be economical about it, and just it's hard to finish. It's easy to start projects. It's very hard to finish them. So I think thinking about that from the start and kind of designing some of the project around that really helps.
And do you have advice for 3D artists who are interested in working in 2D animation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just starting is a good one. I put it off for so long because it seems scary. But having that 3D background, I think, can really help. It's helped me a lot, especially if you already know a little bit of timing. I think some of what can be challenging is sometimes like your draftsmanship needs to catch up and isn't as polished, or you feel limited by that. So I think lots of practice, doing projects, but also trying to get excited about the things that you can bring to the table that are different is also a good way.
I think one of the challenging things about like any form of art is that it's easier for your taste to improve before your own skill does. So your own like self-critic can be really loud, and you just have to quiet that a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially with something like animations, so many people watch animation and like animation, and so many people can point out like what's wrong with your animation, even if even if they are animators. So I think a lot of times when you're first starting out animation, your own goals can be so high, and it's like and you can feel so discouraged about your own work. So I think that's a tough place to be, but I think getting excited about the process and enjoying that for what it is really powerful.
Callan, is there anything else about Criminal Insecticide that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share with the audience?
There's nothing that's coming to mind for me right now. I guess I guess maybe thanking Haley and James again for helping me bring it to life. And it's so much fun. Like it is seriously one of the most rewarding things to work on a project, a creative project, especially with people who have different creative skill sets than you. It's I think that's just one of the coolest things in the world, and I would hope that anyone who's interested can get a chance to do something like that, because it you learn so much, and it's a lot of fun, and hopefully you can get something cool out of it at the end, a cool short film or interesting project. It's just very cool stuff. I'm happy to be able to do it, and I hope other people can too.
Well, Callan, I thoroughly enjoyed Criminal Insecticide. Where can our audience go to see more of your work?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you so much. And you can find more of my work at callanmcgill.com, just Callan McGill. So, or Criminal Insecticide is on YouTube. I also have that the short film project that I mentioned earlier. The one that it ended up being a 10-second clip, but that's also on the same channel as Criminal Insecticide. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Callan McGill, for taking our audience on a tour through Criminal Insecticide. And thank you to our audience for coming along for the ride. If you enjoyed today's live stream, you may be interested in Toon Boom Animation's instructor-led training courses. We have courses on traditional animation, cutout animation, 2D rigging, and compositing at toonboom.com/training, and it can be really great if you're looking to step into a new role at your studio. We'll be back next week with new interviews, so be sure to tune in next time.